Hi, everyone. Welcome again on another PEFC public consultation webinar. Today, we are talking about the PEFC UK, so the British Forest Certification System. My name is Hubert Inhäuser. I'm a technical officer at PEFC International, and I will be your host on today's webinar. Our program is very brief. It has three items on it. First, I will give a short introduction about PEFC International for those who are not that familiar with the PEFC structures. And I'm very happy that I have here Alan Watkins, the Executive Director of PEFC UK, who will deliver the presentation on the UK Forest Certification System. And then at the end, of course, there will be time for questions and answers. So let's get started. The PEFC stands for Program for the Endorsement of Forest Certification Systems. We are an alliance of independent national forest certification systems under the umbrella of PEFC International. The national forest certification systems are all based on PEFC sustainability benchmark standards, or they adopt international standards like the chain of custody. This is a purely voluntary mechanism promoting sustainable forest management through independent third-party certification. We are very glad that we are the world's largest forest certification system and provider of 3/4 of the world's certified and sustainably managed timber. Here we can see a global coverage. It's not fully up to date, but I have some outdated figures for the UK, that the UK represents over 1.5 million hectares of certified forests and 1/10 of the total European chain of custody certificates, so a bit more than 1,000. So a bit more about the UK Forest Certification System. The system was submitted in July for assessment. The assessment will be carried out by a registered PEFC assessor, who is an independent assessor yet to be appointed. Today, on the same day, we have the webinar on 8th of August. We opened the 60 days international public consultation. On this link, you are able to access the complete UK Forest Certification System documentation, and you are more than encouraged to submit your comments until 6th of October. Please note that all these comments submitted to PEFC International will be considered by the assessor in the assessment report. And after this very brief presentation, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and ask Alan to guide us through the UK Forest Certification System. Alan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I shall just try to share my screen. Hopefully you can see that.
It's perfect.
Excellent. Thank you, Hubert, for the introduction. Welcome. My name is Alan Watkins. I'm the Executive Director of PEFC UK and National Secretary, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to the PEFC UK Scheme for Sustainable Forest Management. Some of the things we'll be looking at this morning. Look at the PEFC UK review and revision process. Our certification standard is known as UKWAS, UK Woodland Assurance Standard, and we'll look into that in a bit more detail. But first, we'll have a brief look at the UK forestry sector. As I said, we'll spend a bit more time looking at UKWAS, UK Woodland Assurance Standard. We'll have a look at our review, revision, and standard setting process. A bit more detail at the actual standard itself. That's our 5th iteration of UKWAS. And some comments at the end regarding our application for trees outside forest endorsement as well. So that's what we'll be looking at during the course of the next 30 or 40 minutes. First of all, just a look at UK forestry industry. UK woodland area is approximately 3.24 million hectares, which is about 13% of the land area. Those of you in Europe will know that's way down on the rest of European countries. I think the average is something around about 20–25%. So we're down to 13%. It was 11% a few years ago. We have been going through a planned tree planting timescale, I guess, but it's we haven't been meeting our targets, unfortunately. Certainly across the UK as a whole. I think Scotland may well have been, but the UK as a whole haven't been meeting their targets. So we hope a bit more government backing, and we can meet those targets of increased tree planting over the next few years. The percentage does vary across the United Kingdom. 19% in Scotland, 15% in Wales, and I guess it's those two countries where most of the commercial forestry is undertaken. Down to about 10% in England and only 9% in Northern Ireland. Approximately 0.8 million hectares are owned by the state. The state used to be called the Forestry Commission. That's now been devolved, if you like, into the different countries of the UK. So we have Forestry England, Forest and Land Scotland, Natural Resources Wales, and the Forest Service in Northern Ireland. The rest of the 3.24 million hectares is made up of private ownership. A lot of that would be into group schemes, but there's still a lot of private estates out there as well. Total area certified is just over 1.5 million hectares, so roughly about 50% of the UK forests are certified. So all the state-owned woodlands are certified, plus private owners, as I said, in 3 large group schemes, but there are 3 or 4 smaller group schemes as well, which we have at the moment. Main species being Sitka spruce, certainly the main conifer, the main commercial conifer, although there are others, including Scots pine, Corsican pine, larch and Norway spruce. Hardwoods, we have a big variety, I guess, but the dominant species being ash, beech, oak, alder and birch. I think the hardwood industry in the UK very much bespoke, so going into bespoke furniture production, possibly oak construction as well, but it's way behind the softwood sawmilling activities in the UK. We do have quite a vibrant timber industry. There's about 11.2 million tons of roundwood produced every year. That roundwood predominantly goes into construction, fencing materials and pallet wood. A lot of the sawmill residue also goes to board manufacture, but also a lot of the roundwood production also goes towards board manufacture as well. That said, that only contributes to about 40% of the UK needs. So we've always have been a net importer of timber-based products. At the moment, we're the second largest importer of wood-based products behind China, which is quite scary. Another good reason why we need to increase our tree planting in the UK. And the value of the wood products imports is £8.5 billion. So as you can see, it's quite a big portion of the timber industry itself. Okay, so I want to spend a bit of time just explaining what UKWAS is, because I think, unlike other schemes, it's very unique and very different. UKWAS is actually a company, a not-for-profit company, that was established back in 2002 to own and manage the standard that we're going to be talking about. Oops, sorry. Just want to get rid of some. Okay. So the company's objectives are to own, interpret, develop and promote a certification standard for forest management in the United Kingdom on behalf of the United Kingdom forestry and environmental communities and bodies which represent the interests of people working in woods and forests or using them for the purpose of recreation for the general benefit of people. So that's the overall objective. As I said, UKWAS was first established in 1999. The first PEFC UK endorsement was 2002, so already been up and running for a couple of years before PEFC asked to be endorsed under that standard as well. Since we were first endorsed in 2002, as Hubert alluded to a little bit earlier, we have been re-endorsed 3 times in 2008, 2013, and 2018. So this will be our 5th endorsement. As you can see, UKWAS, the various iterations of UKWAS have sort of been in parallel with the endorsements of PEFC UK as well. The last one was in 2017, and we hope for UKWAS 5 to be published in the spring, early summer of 2023. So UKWAS is a bespoke audit protocol for sustainable forest management. We feel it's a critical piece of soft infrastructure for woodland owners and forest products businesses. And of course, it's an assurance of responsible and sustainable forest management for all stakeholders within the UK. I think the first thing to say is it is a very unique partnership model. I think it's the only standard in the world that's endorsed by both PEFC and FSC. I don't think very often in these webinars that we have FSC mentioned so often, so apologies for that. But it has developed over the last 22 years into a very unique partnership model between the 2 schemes. The scope of the standard itself, the geographical scope is United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, so that includes England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. It does, at the moment, exclude what we call the Crown dependencies, so some of the islands off the UK, such as the Isle of Man and the Channel Islands. UKWAS is a certification standard for demonstrating sustainable forest management. It's not a comprehensive forestry manual, but it complements the UK government's UK forestry standard. We'll talk a little bit about that later, and can help demonstrate the UK forestry standard in the field as it's being delivered. So the baseline for UKWAS is the intergovernmental guidelines, the pan-European operational level guidelines for forest management, the UK government guidelines for forest management, and the FSC and PEFC requirements. These collectively provide a baseline standard to what we have to meet. That said, I think UKWAS always tries to push the boundaries as well. So it doesn't, I mean, obviously that's the baseline. If we can go further and push the boundaries a little bit, then we will do. So quality control, obviously subject to rigorous PEFC endorsement process to ensure conformance. And as I've already sort of said, the scope goes beyond baseline requirements to fill gaps where it's considered necessary. Some thoughts on why it works, and I think it does work very well. It has worked very well over the last 20 or so years. It's a unique UKWAS model. It's based on principled pragmatism. It's an agreement based on building a mutual trust, and that's mutual trust between both PEFC, FSC, the environmental NGOs, and other stakeholders within the UK. The ownership of the standard rests with the stakeholders. All decisions are based on consensus, as they should be. Dual certification means timber growers and processors can easily supply customers with PEFC or FSC certified products. As I said, I think that's unique, and I think it's unique to the UK, and it does seem to work in the UK. At the moment, the majority of the woodlands are dual certified to PEFC and FSC, and they will enter into the log yard of the sawmills and pulp mills as dual certified. Generally from there, the sawmill will make up their minds whether they want to sell that product as PEFC or FSC. I think what they're looking for in the future, certainly from that primary processor, is to pass on the material as dual certified and let the companies with chain of custody further down the supply chain make a decision as to whether they want that as PEFC or FSC. I think that would be really useful for the primary processors and those with chain of custody in the UK. And as Hubert said in the introduction, I think we do have a reasonably large number of chain of custodies in the UK. It's around about 1,120 companies, including those in group schemes. and very much spread across the whole sectors of timber, paper, packaging, furniture, etc. So UKWAS is an enduring partnership really with PEFC in the UK, and that's enshrined in concordats, which we revise and look at and re-sign every 5 years. So the PEFC UK revision process. The first thing we looked at back in November 2019 was the standard setting standard that we have under the UKWAS umbrella. This was reviewed and revised and updated to meet the requirements set out in PEFC Standard 1001-2017. The standard itself defines the rules and constituents of both the steering group and the working group. The steering group itself comprises of economic, environmental and social stakeholders with 12 defined stakeholder constituencies and an agreed maximum representation from each. So we have woodland owners, forestry practitioners, country forest authorities and forestry enterprises, environmental organisations, forest user organisations, wood processing industry, wood products trade, forest workforce, UK countryside environmental heritage agencies, and local government national park authorities. We also have the standard setting bodies, PEFC, FSC and UKFS, and education, research and training. I must admit the last of those sectors, education, research and training, we have struggled a little bit to get stakeholders along on a regular basis from that element. And the three non-voting, obviously PEFC, FSC and UKFS, sit on the steering group and the working group, but are non-voting. So in addition, there is an independent chair and a company secretary. So the steering group issues an invitation for stakeholders to nominate persons to participate in the working group as members. And in order to achieve a balanced representation, the steering group shall strive to have an identified stakeholder group represented. While conducting the standard setting standard, while revising that, we also did a stakeholder mapping exercise so that we could ensure that everybody would be included. It also sets targets for the participation of key stakeholders and proactively seeks their participation by getting in contact with them through emails, phone calls, or private invitations and meetings. The working group this time around probably met around about 28 times. All those meetings were at least half-day meetings, some were full-day meetings, and that was between October 2020 and June 2022. Due to the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, for obvious reasons, virtually all those meetings were virtual, but nonetheless did seem to work very well. We were able to meet the correct timelines and present a pre-approval draft to the steering group, which met on the 30th of June 2022, who approved the pre-approval draft. The working group itself was made up of representatives from, again, the three elements of economic, environmental and social. In the economic, we had Till Hill and Scottish Woodlands, two very large group schemes, representatives from the Small Woods Associations and from the Forest and Land Scotland, which is the state-owned forests. From the environmental, we had representatives from the Woodland Trust, the Soil Association, not so much the certification body, but the charity, and somebody from the Royal Society of Protection of Birds, RSPB. On the social side, we have representatives from community forests, such as Coedwig in Wales, the National Trust, which is very big here in the UK, and the Mersey Forest. I've also already mentioned we had non-voting participants from myself, from FSC UK and UKFS, and again we had an independent chair for that working group. I would like to say at this moment in time, we'll pass on my thanks to the working group for a fantastic job that they've done over a very long period of time and committed a lot of time and hours to the project. Before we sat down with the working group, we did conduct a review in Q3 and 4 of 2020. The review was to decide whether we needed a revision of the standard. This involved obviously stakeholder input as to how they accepted UKWAS 4, previous edition of UKWAS, and any things they thought might needed changing. We also had issue papers prepared by PEFC and FSC. That was a bit of a gap analysis, if you like, as to whether we needed to review or revise and to what level. So the working group undertook a review by consideration of all these issue papers, and the conclusion was that a revision was required. We were hoping initially that the revision would be quite a light revision, but in the end, it turned out to be quite a comprehensive revision of UKWAS 4. So as I said, the working group worked very well to produce a pre-approval draft, which it put before the steering group. Sorry, just go back a little bit. Back to the revision and the review process. The revision was announced publicly by the steering group to undertake a revision of the standard, and then when the commencement would start, and what the revision would include and the information that was required. So we put out there the aims and objectives of the scope of the revision, the standard setting process, detailed revision plan and timetable, how standard users can submit feedback, and a contact point for the revision process. There's also an UKWAS website, which most of this was based on. Obviously, we did as much as we could on the PEFC website as well, but the UKWAS website was the main contact point for people to contact. So as I was saying, the working group prepared a pre-approval draft of the standard and confirms that it has undergone sufficient consultation and any necessary testing, met the aims and the objectives of the revision, and so hopefully merited the approval of the steering group. We also had two consultation processes, initial revision draft and one on the second revision draft. Both these were very successful, actually. The first revision, we actually had respondents, 35 respondents, and those respondents generally gave 2 or 3 comments each. So that was excellent. And on the second revision draft, we had 51 respondents, each giving 2 or 3 comments at least each. So there's lots of comments came back through the revision. Something different we did this time during the consultation process was that we actually ran some webinars, or ran a webinar each time, just about halfway through the 60-day consultation period. So we've given people, stakeholders, a chance to have a look at the drafts. Then we ran a webinar where we went through the drafts, went through the changes, open to answering any questions that these stakeholders might have had. As I said, that worked very well, and I'm sure that's something we will continue to do in future revisions. Yeah, so after the 2 formal consultations and going back and altering the standard through the comments of the second revision draft, the working group remitted the pre-approval draft to the steering group by the end of May 2022, which was actually on time, which was really good. The steering group considered actually approved the certification scheme. That was done on 30th of June. We did give a little bit of leeway in case the steering group could meet till the end of September, but that was actually done on the 30th of June. So then it was up to the certification schemes to prepare and remit the schemes to their international offices for approval and endorsement, which is the point we're at the moment. We do have a target date for UKWAS for the 1st of April 2023. But obviously, that depends on the endorsement process and other things. So fingers crossed for that. But if it goes on a little bit longer, I'm sure we can live with that as well. So the PEFC UK scheme, and just to look at the scheme in a little bit more detail, there's 3 major documents that we have as far as the PEFC UK scheme is concerned. We have the scheme document. This includes information about UK forestry and a bit about the scheme background. It also includes the scheme governance, how everything works, a little bit of what I've been through a little bit earlier. There's a section on the UK Forestry Standard, how important that is. Everybody who manages woodlands within the UK has to comply with the UKFS. The last version of the UK Forestry Standard was 2017, and in fact that document is actually going through a revision process as we speak, which is a little bit unfortunate because we're now a little bit out of sync with those standards. But I think the UKWAS standard is a little bit ahead of the UKFS anyway, so we shouldn't be missing out on anything that we should have in the standard. Also includes requirements for certification, so as what the certification bodies need to do, the standards that they need to be complying with, audit protocols, that type of thing. Also the accreditation, all certification bodies in the UK, whether for sustainable forest management or for chain of custody, are accredited by UKAS, UK Accreditation Service in the UK. So it's a little bit around the accreditation process. And obviously a lot more detail around group certification to make sure we meet the requirements of PEFC Standard 1002/2018. And within that, obviously, what group schemes need to do with requirements of internal audits. So all that is set out within the scheme document. UKWAS 5 we'll have a look at in a minute, along with the trees outside forest appendix. So UKWAS itself, just looking at the section contents, we have 5 main sections of UKWAS. I'm just going to go through some of them briefly. The subsections here aren't the total amounts of subsections. I'm just picking out 1 or 2 examples, good examples. So, for instance, in section 1 is all about legal compliance and UKWAS conformance. Obviously, we look at legislation, compliance with legislation, and the UKWAS standard, what they should and shouldn't be doing, and protection from illegal activities. That's probably, I think, section 1 is the briefest section of the standard. I think there's about 5 subsections in there. By far, the largest section in the standard is section 2, which is management planning. I think in total there are 15 subsections in section 2. Sometimes those subsections are broken down into A, B's, and C's, etc. as well. So there's a lot of detail in section 2. But that looks at things like policies and objectives, setting policies and objectives through your management planning, consultation with stakeholders, adjoining woodlands, adjoining landowners, type of thing, woodland creation, conservation, very much to the fore, conversion, obviously, and monitoring. I think they're the prime subsections within section 2. Section 3 looks at woodland operations, harvesting and restocking. Section on integrated pest management was pretty much rewritten this time round to bring that to date. Sections on pollution, what to do with pollution, how to avoid pollution, and one on infrastructure as well, whether it's building roads, any other type of infrastructure that might be within that woodland. Section 4 concentrated on natural, historical, and cultural environments, and within there we have sections on conservation of ancient and semi-natural woodlands, other priority habitats that may be identified by the woodland manager, maintenance of biodiversity and ecological functions, protection of cultural and historic environmental sites, and also a section on game rearing, shooting, and fisheries management. One of the sections on that was the last one to be agreed by the working group, which was around toxic ammunition. In the UK, we're going through a process of taking lead ammunition away from hunting, certainly within these sorts of areas. There is a phased development for that up till about 2025. And I think, of course, has gone along with that and pushed the boundaries a little bit more than that to try and prevent things like the use of lead ammunition in hunting. Just one example of the long and complicated discussions that the working group held. Section 5 is people, communities and workers, obviously at the heart of what we do with PEFC, but things like public access rights, permissive uses, traditional rights, and health and well-being of local people, visitors and communities. Obviously within the section is health and safety of workers as well, and workers is clearly defined to include everybody who's working within the forest or woodland management unit, which includes volunteers as well, but also looks at training and continued development of workers and workers' rights. But also for every requirement that we have in UKWAS, there's also an example verifier. So some examples of what the forest owner or forest manager should be showing the certification body. Some ways of proof and evidence that they're complying with the requirements. And alongside, I think just about every requirement, I can't think of one that we don't, there's also some guidance notes as well. So quite in-depth guidance as to how you can comply with the requirements, some ideas and thoughts, where there might be some complications possibly with trying to make things a lot easier for the woodland owners to understand what the requirement means. So there's a lot of work gone into providing as much information as possible. Some of the major changes, there were quite a few actually, but just trying to highlight one or two. These have been updated and adapted where thought appropriate. In particular, the working group sought to adapt the standard to reflect not only PEFC requirements, but also some of the global challenges such as climate change, biodiversity loss, resilience of forests now and in the future, enhancing natural capital value woodlands, and safeguarding the provision of valuable ecosystem services. An example of that would be wording on practices that enhance carbon storage in trees and soils, and the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from woodland operations. So we even looked at trying to make the industry more efficient, use less fuel, and have less greenhouse gas emissions. In addition, in the UKWAS standard itself, which will be published, we have it always have it in hard copy, available free to stakeholders, but also we have a PDF copy on the website. But at the end of the document, we have a glossary of terms. So lots of terms that are used throughout the standard. Certainly, terms that are in the glossary are highlighted. So if people don't understand what the term means, they can go to the glossary and have find a definition. There's also some references in the back of the standard, which include the main legislation and further information sources. Those references don't include all legislation, otherwise the document would be too big. But we do have information on the website, have a screenshot there of the website, where you can get access to more of that information on legislation and information sources. I think this has always been well used, and it's a good reference point. Okay, just to finish up on, we've spent a lot of time going through obviously the UKWAS standard. For the first time, UK are also asking for our appendix on trees outside forest to be endorsed as well. The trees outside forest will be an appendix to the PEFC UK scheme document rather than an appendix to the UKWAS document. And the reason for that is that the TOF is for PEFC certification only. FSC don't have such a standard because it's a joint scheme. We couldn't include that into UKWAS 5, but we've made it an appendix to the PEFC UK scheme document. Probably the scheme for trees outside forest is 80%, possibly more, based on UKWAS 5. So we've taken all the new revision of UKWAS 5, all the really good new requirements, and put those into the TOF appendix. There has been some additions and omissions to comply with the Appendix 2 of the 1003 standard for trees outside forest. We did set up our own smaller working group just to complete those additions and omissions. And we did have 2 separate consultation processes, both the 60 days, just on the TOF appendix. We didn't get quite as much feedback as UKWAS 5 did, but we did get some feedback, and that was those comments were obviously taken into consideration. As this was the first time we were doing this, and it was very new to us, we also thought it had a good chance to undertake a pilot test. We were working very closely with a local authority in the UK, just where the UK office is based, and they agreed to go through a pilot test. So they had a full audit by a certification body, a dummy audit, if you like, against the appendix. And we also had a independent assessor assess the requirements against the 1003 standard as well. So I think we've done quite a bit of work to get the appendix to where it is now. We'll be very interested to find out how the endorsement process goes. We have, for the time being, as far as trees outside forest, put the scope at street trees and urban trees. That might be up for scope extension at some point in the future, but initially it will be for urban trees. We're working, as I said, with local authorities. I think that's the target market that we have for trees outside forest. But as potentially agroforestry grows in the future, certainly in the UK, that's something we will look at differently. So that's been quite exciting. I think we'll have to wait and see how that pans out over the next 6 to 9 months. But looking forward to working with the assessor and finding out what they think about it. But I think that's it from me as far as going through how I feel our standard setting process went, our revision process went, a little bit about the UK standard itself. So thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
First of all, thank you very much, Alan, for this well-structured and detailed presentation. I think it was excellent. I think that you can also stop sharing your screen for the moment, and I would like to ask if anybody would have a question for Alan.
Not a question, but some comparison with our situation. But it seems that for TOF in UK will be similar to Portugal, I think. But just to confirm, would be more addressed to urban parks and trees alignments.
Yes, absolutely. We're looking at the urban street trees at the moment. That's who we work with. That's who we've done the pilot study with. And I think that's, as far as PEFC is concerned, I think that's where the marketplace would be for certification, certainly in the UK context. But I think it's small steps. We'll see how it goes. And if it's working, then I said, perhaps a scope extension may be possible in the future.
It seems to be similar to Portugal. Thanks for your presentation, Alan. It was very great.
No problem.
Thank you.
And thank you also, Rachel, for the question. I think that's something which will evolve as we go, that how these urban and agriculture areas would be more connected to the forestry requirements as they are now, or they might need to take a more independent venue for the future. I think that's something which is also exciting for us to see how it could evolve in order to meet also the expectations and also to have the same safeguarding sustainability requirements which these particular areas require. Just to keep you a bit more on the screen, Alan, I just noted for me 2 very interesting things that I think it was excellent, as you mentioned, the comments you received during these initial drafts and so on. And I just wanted to ask you, because some of our NGBs suffer from the lack of feedback from a number of stakeholders. And I just wanted to ask you if you could share us that what kind of special advertisement or social media, what were the means you were using to get those feedback? And the other one is, I think it's not a surprise for me to hear that game management and hunting could lead some long discussions, especially in the UK. But what was for me very interesting is the fishery component, and that's we don't see so often in forestry context. So if you could also explain a bit more, how was the fishery context considered? Was it connection to the wetlands, or I don't know, maybe something similar?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. I mean, just on the how we promoted it, mainly through the website, through journals, close contacts with some of the forestry journals. So they will take an article at the very start of the consultation process to say where we are and what we're doing, and perhaps even mention some of the changes to generate some enthusiasm. But obviously through PEFC, and I'm sure FSC did the same as well, through our own mechanisms of the website and newsletters. I think we were very lucky with the people we had on the steering group. They were very well connected, so they also used their connections as well to put out the fact that there was a consultation. But I really think the webinars worked really well as well. That was the first time we've actually done something like that. And each time we had maybe 60 people on the webinar, which was great. I mean, it helps being virtual as well, because you don't have to arrange people to travel or to waste much of time. It was only for an hour, but it worked really, really well. So I think it was just everybody, both in the steering group, the working group, the schemes, just pushing it as much as possible through every avenue that they have. We did a bit on Twitter as well. Social media was quite important, probably more so than 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So I think that's changed as well. So we push a lot on social media. So yeah, we were quite pleasantly surprised by the number of participants that come back to us as well. I think that's the most we've ever had. So, but also whether I think UKWAS has taken another step beyond what some of the requirements of UKFS were asking, certainly. I think people were interested into how far we were going. Some were quite keen to push the boundaries, certainly on the environmental side. Some were a little bit less keen because it meant a lot more work. So I think so we had a bit of not a battle, but the economic side on one side and the environmental side on the other side, and we had to sort of try and balance that as best we can, because the environmental side wanted to push it more and the commercial side wanted to perhaps not as much. So so from that point of view, I think that generated a lot of conversations as well, which was good. On the other one, I'm trying to rattle my brains what we did talk about as far as fishery was concerned, to be honest with you. Obviously, a lot of it was due to keeping the waters clean, reducing silt runoff and all the rest of it into waterways and rivers and ponds. There were some very specific details which I can't remember, about allowing fishing and potential for contamination through that type of sport as well into the woodlands. I can pass those on to you in more detail when I look them up, but they don't not come into my mind at this moment in time. But I think I think the UK aren't as large in hunting. Certainly fishing, I think we're a fairly big country for fishing, but hunting probably not as large as other European countries. But it is still, certainly for the some of the private estates, it's a big source of income. And there was lots of discussions around that to make sure that works correctly. Even things like controlling pheasant release as well from some of the private woodlands. So, yes,
well, thank you so much. I think that's excellent. We don't need to share everything, because all the stakeholders can look at the UK forest certification system documentation on our website. I think it's full bit very interesting, and based on the presentation, I can tell not only TUF but the other parts, maybe some innovative ways how to manage certified forests in a country. So I'm personally very much looking forward for this assessment as well. And I think if there's no other question for now, then we can leave it with this end note that this system documentation is available until 6th of October. Thank you very much, Alon, for the great work and for preparing the presentation for us today. And also thank you for those who joined today for this webinar. Thank you so much. And with this, I wish you a nice rest of the day. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.